All right, coming up next, Katelyn, Alex, and I break down everything you need to know about how to build a marathon training plan and every aspect of it. We talk about long runs. We talk about the different workouts and the reasons for doing those workouts and the various philosophies on how to nail marathon training. Katelyn's been at it as a coach and an athlete for over 10 years. I've been running marathons for a long time, and Alex is an extremely talented runner who is marathon curious. So, all right, let's get into it. All right, I'm here with Katelyn, Tocci, and Alex Cyr. Katelyn, you're in Costa Rica. Alex, you're back home in Toronto. You were in California. I'll pick your brain about that in a second, about what was going on in Palm Springs. I'm in Nova Scotia, where I'm from, and I'll tell you why in a second. But Katelyn, just before we started rolling with the pod, you were talking about how it was, it's getting a little spicy in Costa Rica right now. How's the running been going as the temperatures start to climb?
It's good. What's climbing a little more than the temperatures is the humidity. And I feel like that's more of a challenge. Like I'd rather run in the heat when it's not so humid, but the rain is starting to come in. We have a rainy season kind of rolling in a little earlier than usual. And so we're getting probably rain just about every day. And so the humidity is like really up there. So it's good. I feel good because I feel finally pretty recovered after the marathon, but, running in some pretty humid weather these days.
It's not the heat, it's the humidity, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Sir.
Oh my God. Yeah. I can only imagine just like slogging through. I find like 75 degrees Fahrenheit painful. So I can only imagine like the dead of summer. I do not know how you do it.
Yeah.
Alex, speaking of heat, you were in, sunny Palm Springs last week. Did you I know you're kind of banged up right now. Did you do anything at all running related? Like, did you imagine yourself running in those mountains that surround Palm Springs?
I thought about running a lot. I did a reel. And doing a reel about running is hard when you can't actually run. So you need to think of adjacent topics. Should I say what the topic is? Should I give people a teaser?
Yeah. Please.
Okay.
The reel is traveling with a runner and how not fun that is for non-runners.
Yes.
Yep. I can see that.
Yeah. And
oh, man.
that was not hard to script because I just took moments from my past when I was traveling with non-runners and was like, okay, so right now is my double. I'm in double thresholds right now. This is what I have to do at 3 p.m. when people are going to the pool. These are the snacks that I bring. I have bananas in my bag. So it's a play on that. And to be honest, I filmed it with my girlfriend who's traveled with me quite a bit and doesn't run. She was like, this is not much different from our usual trips. So if anything, it's accurate.
All right. Because running media sort of took the place of plain old running for you. Cause it was just I got to go do this thing right now. I need just 80 minutes and I'll shower really fast afterwards. We'll make the reservation. Don't worry.
Yeah. It's can you get into the American Airlines lounge and film me doing Bulgarian squats in front of two guys in suits? And we did it.
Amazing.
That's so cool. That's great.
That's
the content that our audience can wait. We'll be waiting for after this pod. Yeah,
and can totally relate to
whether they're the Bulgarian squatters or the people sitting watching weird runners doing the Bulgarian squats at the airport.
We'll probably have a mixed bag. But I'm sure plenty of people have been with a group who are like, no, I just got to get this run in. Can we leave it this time and not this time? I'm sure it's happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I've ever done any sort of strength workout in an airport lounge, but I definitely early on in my marathoning journey, when you're super obsessed with just dotting every I and crossing every T in training, I have definitely been in a situation where I've had to take a long flight and it's just impossible travel day. You can't get your run in otherwise. And you're contemplating how big is this airport? like, will I get in trouble? Will security tackle me if I like try to tuck 10K in going back and forth from gate to gate? Or then it's like, is there a treadmill? Is there a gym in this airport in wherever, Heathrow, Singapore, or whatever, right? I've never actually run in an airport besides trying to catch a flight, but I have definitely contemplated it.
Neither have I. But I think like the way to get away with it is by carrying a little bag. So then people just think you're constantly trying to get your plane, so people will leave you alone. But that's
a pro tip. That's good.
Yeah. And look, we're going to move forward with this. I do want to throw this out there before we go into the real topics. Listen, I was staying at a wellness resort, quote unquote, in California.
Okay.
The place had no gym. I was injured. I couldn't run. The place had no gym. I could go to there were sound baths. Look that up if you don't know what that is. There were, surely didn't know what that was. There were turmeric smoothies. There were massages, so many things. They called themselves a wellness resort. There was no gym.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I guess that's like, that's pure wellness when you're just like,
I don't know. I wasn't all that well.
It's just you. It's just you inside your mind. It's just you enjoying your thoughts, your one true self lying by the pool. Yeah. I mean, Palm Springs is beautiful. It's, very arid. It seems like it's very hot most of the year. I have run there before. It's like kind of one of these places where you got to get up super early to run. Right now I'm back in my hometown, guys. I'm back in Halifax. I run this one event every year. It's the only event that in my entire running career, let's call it, I have never missed, which is the Cabot Trail Relay. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
The Cabot Trail Relay, which for those of you who don't know the geographic minutia of Nova Scotia, Canada, it's Cape Breton is an island in the north part of Nova Scotia, and there's this 300-ish kilometer, 190-mile loop called the Cabot Trail. And it's not a trail. It's actually just like a paved single road, like it's a highway. But it's over this like incredible mountainous terrain, beautiful vistas of the ocean, crazy climbs and descents. And I run this event that I personally think I'm ruining this event for myself for the future because I'm sort of giving this thing away. It's like my little secret. It's a secret that me and about 1,100 other people share that run the event every year. It's, I think, the best running experience I have ever put myself through. I think it's the best running event in the world, period, full stop. It's better than New York City Marathon. It's better than the London Marathon, Chicago, whatever. It's better than the Boston Marathon.
Invite us up. Let us run it with you.
You're welcome. We'll have to. The only challenge is that they only it's a strict cutoff, 70 teams, and there's like a big wait list every year to get a team in, and it's something that I've been doing since 2010. So this is iteration however many for me. They paused for a couple of years during COVID, but I can't wait for it. I have run every single leg on the trail, all 17 of them already. So now I'm like doing another tour of the trail, and I'm running a night leg at like 12:30 in the morning. And it starts where you cruise for like 5K on the top of a mountain. And then it's just this crazy steep descent for about 5 or 6 kilometers where I'm like mentally preparing myself for going like 250, 245 a K pace down the mountain. So, and not because I can run that speed, but because if I don't keep moving at that speed, I will fall straight on my face and break every bone in my body, and then find myself at the bottom of the mountain in a crumpled mess. So
your quads are gonna love that.
Channel Kipchoge or just stumble down.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. My quads will be completely destroyed, but luckily I only have to run one leg. So that's why I'm here. I thought I'd ask you guys before we move on to the meat and potatoes of this pod. Do either of you have a like must do race on your calendar every year? Like, or it doesn't have to be every year, but a race where you sort of feel like it's it's like your home race. It's like the race that you always like coming back to. It's the race that you rather not miss every year. That's kind of like the special one for you.
I do. I definitely do. Here in Costa Rica, we have a race and it's called Moon Run. Ironically enough, because it did used to start or finish in the evening. So you would see some moon time, but now it doesn't. But it's a 60-kilometer race. They have other distances as well. But it's a trail race through the Monteverde cloud forest.
Oh,
here.
yeah. Nice.
It's absolutely incredible. I love it. It's one of my favorites that I've probably run about 8 or 9 times over the past 12, 13 years. So I really try not to miss it if I can't. And I encourage my athletes to go and do it as well because it's just a really, really beautiful fun race.
It's a touch hilly in Monteverde from what I've been there once before. It's incredible. It earns the like cloud forest moniker with all like this sort of like misty mountainous. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Cyr, do you have a secret home race that you like to quietly win every year, stashed away in some rural town in Prince Edward Island or something like that?
You're actually close. I tried to pick something that you didn't know, Michael. It seems like you've traveled everywhere. I could have pulled something out of the island of Phuket and you'd have been like, the island of Phuket. I was there in 2016. And actually this one is close to your home, but I feel like you might not have done it. And Katelyn certainly not, given that it's Eastern Canadian. So this actually happens 2 hours down the road from the Cabot Trail Relay. The race is in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, which is where I went to school, St. FX University. And it's part of the Highland Games weekend, which happens every early July. I haven't done it in quite a few years, so I can't say that I have the longevity that you have. I haven't been out east in the early days of July recently. / I've been injured, but when I'm healthy and there, I do it. It's a 5-miler. It's actually a duo of races. Friday night is the 5-miler, and you do it around the streets of Antigonish. You come close to the university that's there. You go down a path that we used to run a whole lot as university students and athletes. And it's flat. It's not that eventful, but it's a classic route out and back. And most of the alumni from that university and local runners do it. So there are always a few bragging rights that year. Then once that race is over on Friday night, most runners get together, have a drink, have some food. And the next morning is the mile. And that's just a quick mile down the road. It's like a full downhill mile on Main Street of Antigonish. So you're just passing a bunch of shops and local restaurants. And it's like you don't, if you're going for the win, you don't do one without the other. And the whole thing was to try to win both. And I managed to do that one year, I think 2018. And that was the ultimate, like my ultimate goal for that weekend. And I haven't run it since. So I'm due for another one. But that Highland Games 5-mile is probably the closest thing that I have to a race that hits close to home.
Is this a kind of Highland Games where like they also have these bizarre like eating and strength competitions where you have to like chuck a giant timber pole as far as you can and that sort of challenge?
Yeah. It's like a week-long event, but the runners only come in for Friday because the races are Friday and Saturday. But it's my understanding that before, like on Wednesday, Thursday, they have these Scottish, like it's Scottish of origin, right? They have these like Scottish strength events that happen on the infield of the track, which is like lifts, and it's very strength-based. I don't know about the food. Yeah, I'll have to check. They should have the food competition after the running competition.
The haggis eating competition. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that there should be a cumulative score for the fastest 5-miler, 1 mile, and the farthest timber throw by one person. Cause I think that sort of levels the playing field.
It's like the decathlon, the Scottish decathlon.
The Scottish decathlon. I like it. All right. So before we jump into our main topic today, we're going to just do one mega topic. We're going to talk about structuring your marathon, because, okay, so we've got a little bit of time before kind of the fall running season really starts to ramp up. And I know a lot of people are thinking about, okay, how am I going to go about running my first marathon, running my best marathon, running a PR, just figuring out this whole marathon thing. So we're going to break down how we do our marathon training plan, how Marathon Handbook sort of constructs this training plan. We're going to talk to Katelyn, who's the author of said training plan. So we're going to get into every single detail, the nitty gritty. It actually will serve as kind of a nice, I think a nice component or complement if you're following one of our training plans, for sure. And even if you aren't, I think we're going to get into a lot of details and discuss a lot of the kind of the theory and the ideas behind how you build out that whole training cycle for a marathon. But before we get into that, we have to do running trivia. Yes, Katelyn is so psyched. It's her favorite part. Okay, so this is how it's going to work. I have concocted one skill testing question that only the dorkiest of runner would just know off the top of their head. But I trust that both Katelyn and Alex are indeed that dorky. I will pose the question. I will allow you to ruminate and for it to haunt you throughout this pod. And then later on in the show, we will circle back. We'll see how Katelyn and how Alex do with the answer. And then I'll reveal the answer as well. Okay, so drum roll, please. What vegetable is the only scientifically proven endurance sports enhancer that is also legal? And why does it have one very serious drawback? And what is that drawback? Okay, allow that to percolate. And we'll take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to pick Katelyn's brain about how the heck we structure a marathon training plan. We'll be right back. All right, and we're back. Marathon training plans. A vexing question, a complex issue. And luckily, we've got a coach and someone who has built a number of training plans, including training plans for us at Marathon Handbook. Katelyn, let's get into first things first. Like, what's for you as a coach an ideal length for a training plan? Someone comes to you. I mean, you can talk about different ability levels if you'd like, but like, what's that kind of sweet spot for an overall length if you're going to start thinking about, say, a fall marathon? Like, how many weeks do you need?
Yeah, I'd say that if you're thinking about a fall marathon, you got to think about getting started pretty soon. And of course, every single thing that we're going to talk about today is going to depend on so many things. And we just know that. So I just want to get that out there, right away, because it's going to depend on your goal, if you want a time goal, if it's your first marathon, what your fitness level is like, if you're a runner, if you're a non-runner. Of course, like, everything depends, right? And we know that from all the courses I've taken and all the studying that I've done. Everyone always says, even the most famous coaches say, well, it depends. It's going to depend on this athlete and trial and error this and trial and error that. But with all that aside, I would say that with all of my athletes that I've coached over a decade, I would say that most have a pretty successful marathon, whether they like between 16 and 20 weeks, like 20 weeks for someone who needs to do some sort of base building. 16 weeks probably for someone who's got a great base. And then we've got time for 4 to 5 4-week like mini cycles, the mesocycles within the macrocycle. So I think for me, anywhere between 16 to 20 weeks would probably be ideal for someone who's going to run a marathon.
Yeah, Alex I guess you're sort of riding shotgun on this because if you've listened to the pod before, we've sort of picked on poor Alex as being like marathon curious, but having yet to run a marathon. So like, perhaps like if you're listening to this as well and you're thinking, I've never run a marathon before, maybe I might contemplate taking a stab at at this. You're not alone. Mr. Cyr on the pod is also following along. But like Alex, for you, like building, you've done a load of 5Ks and 10Ks, and obviously run at a very high level. Like, what's the max sort of weekly build that you've done?
Max weekly.
Yeah.
24 weeks. And I ended up
24.
Yeah. And I ended up injured. I was hurt the season before. So I got an early start to it, and then just extended a week, trying to hit my goal, which was a 1500 meter goal, and ended up completely banged up because I had stretched the season too long. But yeah, I'm here to listen. So, okay. This is how you know someone knows what they're talking about. I'm going to pump Katelyn's tires is when they start anything related to training plans with, this varies from person to person. This is when I'm like, okay, I'm dialed in. I remember one time I was at this running expo, and a very prominent figure in the world of running, I'm not going to say who it is, I'm not going to name drop, was on stage giving a presentation about marathon training. There were probably 300 people listening to this person. Someone raised their hands with a question, and he said, you. And the person says, when should I be taking a gel for my marathon? And without skipping a beat, he goes, 10 miles. That was it. I was like, what? No, there's no chance. No. Then I dialed out. I was like, okay, nah, this guy has canned answers, doesn't know what he's talking about. So, okay, I'm completely convinced that Katelyn's going to lead me to success whenever I start chasing the marathon.
I think I know exactly who you're talking about, Alex. And
you were there. You were there.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. And that's a danger of writing the book on this stuff, is that I think you start to get pretty locked in. And yes, I think there are sort of trends or kind of obvious moments or amounts. And we're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about like, how long should my long run be, and these sorts of things. And there are kind of rough guidelines for this, but obviously like this is something where I think an element of running the marathon and of becoming a student of the marathon is really exciting, is that over time you kind of figure out, if you're paying, pretty close attention, you're a self-reflexive person, you start to kind of piece together kind of what works for you specifically and what you react best to. And what you enjoy doing as well, right? Because like, let's not forget, this isn't necessarily, it's a hobby, not a job, right? So right. It's something that you should enjoy as well as practice. And I think there is kind of a right way and a wrong way with this stuff, but I think it's pretty variable and pretty flexible. So 16, I like that 16-week number myself. For me, as somebody who's been running marathons for like 14 years now. I kind of fall into that 14-week range. I've tried 12. It's a bad idea. It's just not enough time. But 14 weeks with one caveat, which is that I'm always sort of I'm typically coming off a marathon cycle before that. So I've already got that fitness. Like it's one of the, like, I think it's one of the psychosis of the marathon runner is that you finish a season, you take a week completely off running, you take a month of very easy running, and then you feel like you're starting from like absolute zero, and you're just like, well, I have lost all fitness I ever accrued in my entire life, and I am now rebuilding myself from scratch, which is obviously not true. So I always try to remind myself, like, the last season was a pretty good base. We can roll into it. There's a little bit of flexibility there. But I'd say for like a newer runner, like if you're trying the marathon for the very first time, and maybe you've not run more than 3 or 4 times a week, but you're looking to make that big leap and that big commitment, like I think, Katelyn, you're nailing it. Like maybe a 4 weeks of like easy running, so you can really kind of start to try to get to that like running 5 days a week type thing is probably I'd say a really good idea. So you mentioned 2 words that I think maybe caught some people a little off guard, or maybe we're not clear on what it means, like macrocycle, and I like how you said mesocycle. I think I always say mesocycle, which probably is totally incorrect, but
I think that's a Japanese dish, Michael.
I know. It's the umami. So break down for us the idea, sort of the theory behind the macro and the mesocycle.
Okay. Well, whenever I have a new athlete or an athlete has chosen a race, I always put together the macrocycle, which is like, okay, from the day we're starting until the day of the race, we've got to put together our cycles. Okay. So what are we going to do during these 16 and 20 weeks and really map it out, right? It's like a big puzzle and you got to put all the pieces together. So I try to map out each of those cycles. So the macrocycle for me is everything. Is from the day we're starting until the day of the race. And then within that, we've got our other cycles. Like when are we going to work on speed? And when are we going to work on threshold? And when are we going to become more race specific? So then it gets broken up into usually they're 4-week cycles. And so those mesocycles are 4-week cycles where we're usually probably going to focus on, we are going to focus on one objective and we're going to add specific workouts that's going to work towards that objective and switching that up about every 4 weeks.
Yeah. And so, that leads us to, like you just described, the sort of the mesocycle and like specifically, if you're new to marathoning, or maybe you're trying to really figure out how to do the marathon right, maybe you've run a bunch of marathons, but it wasn't as structured. And now you're trying to find a plan that makes sense, that's going to like kind of take you to the next level. I think thinking about the mesocycle, thinking about that sort of week to week specific training and building these little miniature blocks are really important. Like, how do you go about like structuring a mesocycle for an athlete?
Yeah, what I would do throughout the entire thing is I go from least specific to most specific, right? So once we're starting out, what I like to do is I like to work on speed, because if we're going to work on short interval training speed workouts, we're going to do it at the very beginning of the macrocycle and kind of get that out of the way, to work on speed, to think about technique, turnover, maybe hill sprints, interval training, track work, and take maybe those first 4 weeks to do it, because it's not specific for marathon training. So we want to do it at the very beginning. And as we go, the runs will become, to me, the objectives will become more specific for the marathon. So we'll start out with some short stuff, some speed stuff, and then we'll move into more of like the threshold phase, which to me, we can get into that later, is super important, working on threshold runs, and then get more, into the race specific, work on marathon pace, that sort of thing. So that's kind of how I would break it up. If you need a base, you would do a base. Of course, if you're a complete beginner runner, you don't even have to really worry about speed work. You just want to kind of work your volume up and not really worry about any of that. But if you've run a marathon before, or if you're a runner going to run a marathon and you're used to those kind of workouts, then you would go ahead and you would throw those objectives in, and those maybe like four or 5 cycles, depending on how much time you have. As I said, least specific to most specific is the kind of the best way that I like to go about it.
And I guess that's like, Alex, that's sort of where the experience of training for like anything from like the 1500 on the track through the 5 and the 10K, then, I mean, they even diverge mid training cycle, but certainly that's where like the marathon, it's kind of like where you split off, if you're imagining like 2 trains on on parallel tracks, and then like the marathon, you just sort of veer off into this land of doing a lot of threshold, a lot of lactate threshold work for the meat and potatoes of your build. And where I think maybe for a 5 or a 10K, you start getting like way more specific, and you start racing even throughout your season. I guess is that your experience?
Yeah. It's like the actual content of the workouts are flipped from the marathon strategy, but the idea is the same. From what Katelyn is saying, it's you start the season working on things that potentially you'll need down the road, but are not like the most important for the race. So now it's flipped, right? For the 5K, 10K, you start your season with longer miles because you want to develop that longer base so that when you're 4, 6, 8 weeks before your goal race, you don't have to expend a bunch of energy doing your long runs, because you want to take that energy and spend it on 8 by 1 kilometers or 5 by 2 kilometers at 10K pace. So the principle's the same. It's just the content is flipped.
Yeah. So we've flicked at workouts, and obviously there's different types of workouts for each of these phases of marathon training. And I think a lot of people, when they think about that that base building in the first phase of marathon training. I know I still do. I typically do hills in the first section. And I have I have a fondness for hills, which I know like hills are sort of like the love-hate thing, right? You feel strongly one way or another. So I thought it'd be interesting to pick both your brains about what your favorite, like what a personal favorite workout is. Like if there's such thing as looking forward to a workout, particularly like early on when you're starting to kind of get into a build, is there a workout that you look to or you get excited about, or is going to challenge you and you kind of are a little bit afraid of, but in a good way?
Hills or like speed work at the very beginning or threshold stuff or anything?
Oh, anything at all. Like pick, what is your, if you are medium fit, so like you're not, because when you're super fit, it's just like, just throw anything at me. It's going to feel amazing. If you're medium fit and you're looking to be scared straight, but wonderfully challenged, while you're in your marathon training, like what's a workout that you're kind of excited about?
To be honest, I know that this is going to sound like I just like to torture myself, but I love threshold runs. And I love when threshold runs get hard. Like, because I feel like I'm improving so much when I can get through those threshold runs. Like, and when they get tough, when it's not just short threshold intervals, but you're like, okay, I'm going to hold it for 15 minutes or 20 minutes I'm like, okay, yeah, I feel like I'm getting better. Like, I feel like this is really pushing my limit. So I love a good threshold run. And those, as you mentioned, like kind of like scare me. Like, oh, am I going to be able to do it? Like a fun workout. And I don't know if people are going to think, wow, you're nuts. This is fun. But like, I like 400s on a track because I feel like I can get through a 400.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? If I'm going to do a 400 and then I'm going to completely rest after it or do like a slow recovery jog, I'm like, yeah, I can push through this. And by the time you're finishing the 400s when you start to feel horrible or like halfway through. But yeah, I can push for 200 and get through this. Like 400s is something I really like as something kind of fun to work on my speed. Cause as a trail runner, I don't do that as much. So, work on my speed. And then the threshold is something that I absolutely love where I feel like, yeah, I'm getting better. This is a great workout. I really feel like, my body like burning.
Yeah. The 400 is like one of these distances where, especially if you're doing it on the track, you're just like, I just need to get to the others. Just need to get back to the other side or where. Yeah, exactly. The mile is a much more crushing, phenomenon. You're like, okay, I like straight up lose count. I know it's like counting to 4 and it makes me sound like a moron, but like, you're in trouble when you're losing count in a mile repeat, but I definitely have done that before. Alex, what's like, it's like picking a favorite child if you hate all your children. What's your go-to workout?
Okay. I have this one workout that bridges the gap between early season workouts and late season workouts. The early season workouts being easier, good for the mind, getting myself back into it. The late season workouts being more what Katelyn described, really scorchers, tough workouts. But the mid-season workout, that workout between the two is a progressive run. So I do it inside of 10K training. So if you're marathon training, you probably want to extend it. Mine's about a 14-kilometer thing. You get out the door and you start your warm-up. Your 14th kilometer should be at your 10K race pace. And between that first K and that last K, you turn the screw and you get a little bit quicker every kilometer. I like it because you're not starting right away at race pace. You're not doing a tiny little warm up and then jumping into race pace. It's like a microcosm of your season. You start it slow, it gets comfortable, and you don't really realize when it starts to hurt. But at one point you realize, oh my God, I'm running near my race pace. Now I'm running at my race pace. And you finish it thinking, all right, I've crossed this road. I've gone the distance. I know what it's like to run at race pace. Now I'm ready to go. And it's not the hardest workout, but it's the most rewarding because it makes me feel like I've gotten there. And now I'm ready for the real barn burning workouts.
That's like a haiku, Alex. That's like a beautiful piece of sort of contemplative philosophical poetry, that workout you just described there. It's like a microcosm of your entire cycle. I like that as an idea. And I also like that, like, psychologically, the sort of, I guess it's often referred to as either a cut down run or a progression run, right? And that's a nice one. That's a really elegant, simple, easy to wrap your mind around concept. There's a goal within the goal, and that goal being that target race pace once you get to it. But there's a progression that you have to go through. And it's not just like putting your head in a vice and immediately just like spinning it as fast as possible and going to suffering suddenly. Because I think that's a big challenge and a big problem with running overall, especially with really A-type runners, which most of us are, is you look at numbers and you're like, I have this goal, and the goal is time-based. It's, I want to run this time. And then it's, that time means I have to run this pace. And this pace means that my, VO2 max is this, and my lactate threshold is that. And I have to hit, this pace for this type of run and that pace for that type of run. And then you get caught up in these numbers, and your body doesn't understand what numbers are. Your body is an organism that is reacting to a lot of different elements, including the weather, like barometric pressure, and then stress that you've experienced, which we don't even fully scientifically understand, but has obviously a very significant impact on how we perform physiologically, right? And the barriers that stress create mentally, psychologically for us to get over. So I like the idea of a progression run or a cut down because it allows you this ability to get into that headspace and to get into that rhythm and to get your breathing right and to get your body on side with you. That's a good one. I would say I'll quickly just touch upon hills because I think hills not only are, I think because hills are such a tried and true component to the marathon training plan that we lose sight as to like why we do hills and what the value of them are. And hills for me offer two real massive positives. One, hill repeats. Now I'm talking like anything from like a 30-second hill to a 90-second hill if you want to do it by time, or you can just go like, I'm going to run this hill and I'm going to try to get to like 200 meters, 300 meters, and 400 meters throughout the course of my, of a mesocycle of like say a 4-week or 3-week block with a down week at the end or whatever. And hills allow you to, first of all, build strength and without injuring yourself. Because I think when you can get on the track and you can start spinning out 800s, which when you think about it, a 90-second hill and running an 800 for a lot of people is sort of more or less it's triggering, it's attacking the same systems, it's triggering the same types of adaptations, and it's the same amount of time. It's like, it's the same thing, right? Except you're putting one on a vertical, and that vertical is sort of saving you from yourself, from like blowing a hamstring because it's like week 3 of training and you're sort of feeling a bit frisky and you're just like, I'm going for it. But if you're on the track, you can kind of screw yourself by doing that. But on a hill, good old gravity is kind of saving you from yourself a little bit. And then the other thing that I find really valuable with a hill is a hill builds in these incredible physiological efficiencies over time. They're just like, without you even realizing it, you're putting yourself through this incredible crash course in becoming a more economical runner, right? Like, just think about the form when you're running on a hill, right? It's like an over-exaggerated version of how you run. And I like to think about that when I'm running hills. I'm like, okay, how's my posture? Where are my hands? Like, how do I move my arms? Where am I looking? Where are my eyes? How am I driving my knees? Where do I place my feet on the hill? That sort of thing. And they're a great distraction for when you're like absolutely suffering running up a hill. So have either of you ever heard of or done this fartlek workout? And I'll explain what a fartlek workout is. a fartlek workout is sort of, it's a Finnish word, means speed play in Finnish. Basically, it's just like run fast and then run not so fast and then run fast again. There's a fartlek workout that this dude from Australia, this Olympic marathoner named Steve Monaghetti, came up with. He called the Mana or the Mona. Have you guys ever done a Mona before?
Nope.
I haven't. No. What is it?
All right. Okay. Not to go too far down a rabbit hole here and turn this into like a 2-hour podcast about nerdy workouts, but you do 2 times 90 seconds at lactate threshold pace. So 90 seconds at a pretty good hard pace, faster than your marathon pace. Lactate threshold usually is about how fast could you run evenly over the course of 60 minutes? That would be an easy way to calculate your lactate threshold. So like for a lot of people, it's sort of 10 miles, 15K, 14K, 13K. It's sort of like depending, or even like around 12K if you're sort of more of a newer runner, 12, 11K, that sort of thing. So it's like how fast can you run for 1 hour, all out, giving it your hardest. If you were like put on a 1 hour time trial, what could you do? That's that pace. So you run 90 seconds on, 90 seconds off 2 times. So 90 on, 90 off, and then 90 on, 90 off. And then you do 4 of 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off. You do that 4 times. And then you do 4 of 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. And then you do 4 of 15 seconds on, 15 seconds off. Sounds easy because it's like, hey, minute and a half, a couple times, 60 seconds, a couple times, 30 and 15. It's a 20-minute overall workout. But the tricky part is you have to do the recovery is supposed to be what's called a floating recovery. So it's a recovery where you're not just like jogging to catch your breath. It's a recovery where you're almost trying to run a spirited easy run pace. And it just turns into this bloodbath at about halfway through the 30-second section of it. But it's an amazing way for you to test your fitness over the course of 4 or 5 weeks. It's something that I will throw into that first 4 weeks, Katelyn, that you mentioned at the very beginning of the build. If you don't want to do like a crazy workout, but you want to throw in a 20-minute block once a week just to sort of see where you're at, do the Monaghetti, do a Mona, and see how you feel. After week 1 is really kind of demoralizing because it's very hard. And then week 4, when you start to wrap your head around it, kind of like Alex, like with your cut down workout, you start to feel really good about where you're at by week 4, which is really neat.
All right, I'll give it a try.
Yeah, Google Mona workout. I think we have at least one article on the site about it. So it's kind of like one of these secret workouts that's really kind of amazing. All right, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the different methods of attacking that marathon training, be it heart rate, perceived effort, or just focusing on pace-based training. Okay, we'll be right back. All right, and we're back. First thing that we're going to talk about is kind of how you approach this training. Like, how do you do it? Like, what sort of feedback are you looking for to understand where you're at, if your numbers are correct, if you need to adjust them, if you need to adjust that end goal, whatever your end goal decides to be or is in the marathon. And there's a few sort of tried and true methods, Katelyn. Let's walk through each of them a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. And to be honest, a coach, for example, I don't use just one method. It's also going to depend on the athlete. It's going to depend on the objective. And I also mix methods within the same training program. So just to explain a little bit what that means. For example, most of you are probably familiar with heart rate training, right? You, set up zones. You do like a maximum heart rate test, or you can, use formulas to figure out your maximum heart rate, but it's always nicer to do a test because it's going to be a little more precise for you. Figure out your max heart rate and then work within the zones of percentage of your max heart rate, right? So zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, each with a different, effort level. The problem with heart rate training that I've found, because I'm not using it as much as I used to when I started coaching about 10, 12 years ago, we use a lot of heart rate training with our running club and with my athletes. But depending on where you live, depending on a lot of different factors, the heart rate numbers can really become askew. So, for example, here in Costa Rica, it's hot, it's humid, you're running in the sun. The humidity has literally made my heart rate fluctuate 15 beats per minute, depending on what I'm doing. If I run super early in the morning or then run with sun or run in, closer to the beach where it's a whole lot hotter and a whole lot more humid, or whether I'm running closer in the city where we have a little more altitude and it's not quite as warm. So heart rate can be affected in tons of ways. If you consume caffeine, if you ate something if you're taking a medication that's altering your heart rate, like heart rate can be affected by so many different factors. It is great to use if you feel like most of those factors don't affect you and you can really rely on your heart rate. Because what's the problem? If it fluctuates too high, then you might be holding back in a workout where you could actually push harder because you're holding back because you're worried about the numbers. Okay. Or vice versa. Perhaps your heart rate isn't getting up and it could work both ways. You could either push too hard or maybe you're not pushing hard enough within your workouts. So the next one is rate of perceived exertion, right? Your RP, like on a scale from 1 to 10, how do you feel? So, 1 is obviously something very, very easy. It could even be like brisk walking for some people or walking, right? And a 10 is going to be like a 30-second max sprint speed. So you can work your, rate of perceived exertion with your workouts. So your coach would tell you, okay, this threshold run is going to be between a 6 and a 7, or this easy run or this marathon pace run is going to be 5, or wherever you are with the rate of perceived exertion. So instead of thinking about pace or instead of thinking about heart rate, you think about how you feel. So each one of those numbers has a description and it'll tell you how you're supposed to be feeling while you're running at that speed or at that pace or for those intervals in that workout or when you're recovering. And to be honest, with the studying and the courses that I've taken most recently, it seems to have become very popular, even among really experienced and advanced athletes. And I think it's for the same reason that I mentioned about heart rate. Like if you're pace training and you're doing this really hard workout and you're looking, oh no, I got to stick to my pace, but you feel amazing, then maybe you're holding yourself back. Right. So again, with the rate of perceived exertion, I feel like you can really run, you can be more precise. Right. And then of course it can always affect you the other way. But I feel like with the rate of perceived exertion, I'm using it a lot with a lot of my athletes and it's worked out very well. And then we've got pace training. So pace training, you take a 3K test, a 5K test, or you run a 10K race. You get that piece of data and you stick it into a training calculator. I like to use VDOT, Jack Daniels running calculator. It's always been one of my favorites. And I throw that in there, my race result or my athlete's time trial result, 3K test. And then it will basically spit out great information at you if you're able to take the test well, if you're able to push as you're supposed to push in a test like this. And that's a whole nother story. And that's, trying to get used to taking those kind of tests and being good at taking those kind of tests without either burning out or finishing the test and feel like you have too much in the tank. So you put this piece of data into the calculator and it spits out training paces for you. So when you have your workouts, you say, okay, I want to do this workout at my threshold pace. So for these intervals, run at threshold pace. And for your recovery intervals, run at easy pace, or even like just a recovery jog, which isn't even on the list. So I think those are the three main. Then you've got power, which a lot of cyclists use, and some runners as well. I'm not as familiar with using that system. I prefer using either rate of perceived exertion or pace training. But those are probably the two most common ones that I'm using. I don't know if you guys use any other one, or what are your thoughts on those?
Oh, I was going to say, this is the moment where we have to like show our cards. It's like,
yeah.
Okay, so Alex, how do you train? Which one do you use?
I like to think I've become mature enough to use RPE, rate of perceived exertion. It wasn't always like that. In college, I was in an exercise physiology class with a few of my teammates, and the lab instructor liked to use us as dummies, as test dummies, because we were endurance athletes. And so we'd get on the treadmill and he would make us run to exertion. And a part of the test was asking us intermittently, what's your rate of perceived exertion? And then it just became a pissing match between each of us. And we tried to just downplay our exertion. So we're like booking it on the treadmill, barely breathing, and be like, "Okay, RPE," and we'd go 6, and then keep going until we wipe out the treadmill. So now things are different. I'm 28. I'm a little bit more honest with myself. That's what I used. I find that, so colloquially, right? I talk to people who are getting into running and they're super into the zones. The zones are what is in right now. I can't say I've
the
trained
zones
that
are
way.
so hot right now.
They're so in right now. I'm not into it yet. It's just not something I've trained with historically. I would need a Katelyn to guide me with these mixed methods, because if I'm currently, I guess I'm self-coached. It's hard to jump from one metric or one way to measure your own workouts to another without neglecting the other. So for now it's RPE, but the zones got me curious just because of their popularity.
Alex is zone curious, and his perceived rate of telling himself the truth and being honest is, you're going to rate it what, a 7.5 on 10 right now? Is it 8? Are we at an 8 on 10 of perceived rate of honesty and how you rate your exertion levels?
I'll give myself a 7.5. This is 7.5.
It's just getting meta now. It's like perceived rate of a perceived rate. Katelyn, the Zen master, what do you do?
No, I do. I like to use rate of perceived exertion and, well, especially because I'm a trail runner. So when we're running on the trails, we use rate of perceived exertion. I mean, that's the way to go. Like
you kind of have
to. Yeah, we have to. It used to be a lot of heart rate training, but again, the climate here, it just didn't make that much sense. Or some of our long runs will take their runners, up at altitude. So we're talking like 2,500 meters. So, that is also going to affect your heart rate, and what's going to, it's going to affect your rate of perceived exertion as well, to be honest. But, I mostly use that. But when I just trained for this previous marathon, I did use pace training I use rate of perceived exertion, of course, like for my recovery runs. I'm not going to try to put in any sort of easy pace or anything. I'm just going to run to recover. But in all of my other workouts for the marathon, I did use pace training because I really was trying to work to a specific time. So I feel like I need to feel these paces. I need to hit the mark. And so I did use pace training for road running, but rate of perceived exertion for my trail runners out there, that's pretty much the way we do it now.
Okay. Show and tell time. Yeah. I am similar to you, Katelyn. I have found myself in the last number of years doing a combo of pace-based training and perceived rate of exertion. And how I came upon this is actually pretty organic, which is, I think everyone, when you've been doing this for a while, you start thinking to yourself, like, maybe it's a good idea that I track how I am feeling, how I'm doing, so that if something does go wrong, and in the moment I'm having a difficult time understanding why it's going wrong, I can look back and like scan my training log and see that it was like, 8 on 10, 9 on 10, 7 on 10, 5 on 10, 3 on 10, 1 on 10, and you can see the trend and you can sort of backtrack and figure out where the trend began to turn in one direction or another. And I think in terms of pace-based training, once you get to a certain level and you have a certain level of experience and you're on kind of the learning curve, the steep learning curve of marathon running, you're starting to level off and you're fighting for maybe seconds more than you're fighting for minutes in terms of a time-based goal. I think then you can pretty confidently dial into focusing on paces. The danger in focusing on paces is we all have this vision of what our goal is and what we're capable of. And say you put a big fat number at the end of the rainbow, at the end of the training cycle, and you're like, I want to run under 4 hours for the marathon, 3 hours for the marathon. And you just focus on that pace. And then you start running at that pace as if that's your marathon pace. But that's 20 weeks, 16 weeks, 14 weeks in the future. That's an entire training block of fitness in the future. And starting from that starting point with that marathon pace and with all those paces lined up is an inorganic way of doing things. And it's really tough to be honest with yourself and to say like, okay, I'm not actually at that 4 minutes and 45 seconds a kilometer pace for the marathon that I'm focusing on. I am actually more at 5 minutes a kilometer for the marathon right now, but I'll have the confidence that in 6 or 8 weeks, I'm going to start to snap into that pace that I really want to focus on and achieve down the line. And that's a really difficult needle to thread. And spoiler alert, we can talk about that when we talk about the value of having a coach. Like that's something where someone else can really help you plot that course and figure out the math of that and give you the honest truth about kind of where you're at with your training. But I'm at a place now in my running where I really kind of bounce back and forth between RPE, perceived effort, and also paces, especially with easy runs. With easy runs, I just tell myself easy can be as easy as I want it to be. And sometimes at the beginning of a season, I'll just tell myself, like, instead of putting pressure on myself to have to run 12 kilometers or 14 kilometers or 16 kilometers, or 10 miles or whatever you want, however way you want to measure it, I just tell myself, like, today I'm going to go out and I'm going to run for 70 minutes because I know that's sort of ballpark that number, but it takes the pressure of that obsession with mileage off. And then I tell myself the goal here is to feel amazing. So I want to go and I want a restorative, easy recovery run. And if that means that I have to drag my feet through a much slower pace than I typically would, that's cool. That's totally okay. If I were really brave, I would leave the watch at home and just run on time, but I don't do that. I still run with the watch. So, yeah. My one last thing I would say about heart rate before we move on to the next subject is I think heart rate can be really valuable at the beginning of a season because it can help guide you in the direction of where these paces and perceived effort rates are, right? It can help, especially if you're newer to this, it can be a really fruitful guide to tell you, like, okay, your zone 2 is kind of in this ballpark. And you went out and you ran this like easy run and you were kind of hitting zone 3 and 4. Like maybe you need to dial it back a little bit. Right. So, I noticed that like Apple Watch does a really good job with that. You can actually just have it live on your watch, like, and it's beautiful and colorful, of course, because that's what Apple does with design. It's like, I'm floating around zone 1. This is lovely. I'm climbing towards zone 2. Got to slow it down a little bit. But okay, so let's pivot into the next big chunky component to the marathon training block, and that's the long run. Oh, the long run. I think maybe the most important part and the big differentiator in marathon training from other distances. Alex, just out of pure curiosity, what's the longest run you've ever done in training?
28 kilometers. 28
so
kilometers.
That's like very close. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was probably overkill because it was 10K training. It was summer. I wanted to challenge myself, but I've never hit the 30K mark just yet.
So Katelyn, I know you run ultras. So like asking you what your longest long run is kind of, but like specifically for the marathon, what's your longest long run like?
Yeah, I did 34 kilometers for my longest long run, and it felt good. And I did it 3 weeks out, so I felt like I had plenty of time, like to taper back down. I did like a couple 30s previous weeks. And
yeah, so that's I say like a caveat would be that obviously you're not just going to go out and hammer 16 weeks of 30 plus K long runs.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, I had, thinking about a few months out, I think I was, started out between like the 22, 24 kilometer range, maybe bumped it up to like 24 to 28. And then in the next month, like a 30 here, but always thinking about like, raising the volume for a few weeks and then taking a dip back down. That's something that we haven't mentioned that I just think is important, that it's not just like we linearly, increase our volume and go up and up. Of course, you want to take dips, so so you can recover. And then when you start back up, your fitness level after those 4 weeks should be, should start up at a higher fitness level than you did, before that cycle. But yeah, I think kind of hovering around in the mid to high 20s for most of it, but with taking some breaks. I ran a half marathon, which that felt a lot harder than the slower 28 and doing a 21 all out. But yeah, and then maybe a 30 and then a 34 for the longest long run. What about you, Michael? What do you do?
I'm again, you and I are, we're on the, like, we're just like the mind meld is going on right now here. I'm right around in the same ballpark. I've in my sort of last bunch of years, I've become more focused on doing a larger number of 30 plus K or 20 mile type long runs in my marathon training block. But that's, I fully acknowledged something that's very specific to me that I respond to. I respond to higher mileage, and not everyone does. And I respond to higher mileage, and it's also like a lack of talent thing where it's like you compensate by running more mileage. Luckily, I'm not very injury prone, which is great. I'm pretty resilient. So, but it's something I've experimented with over the years. And I do quite a few 20-ish mile long runs in my block, like maybe 8. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but I know that's not for everyone. And I know I know that for some people that can really cause burnout, and it can be very difficult to ramp up to that number as well. 'Cause it can be painful in the first couple, like just going from like 28 kilometers to 32. And then you do another 32. It's like that second week, you're just like, oh, I need to have a nap this afternoon, which at this stage in my life, it's not afforded. I do not have a nap in the afternoon after a long run. So, but yeah, I hit around, I'm happy if I get 20 miles. I will go up to around 34. I tend to focus on time a little bit more with my long run. So I will look at, for me personally, I'm trying to aim for running a marathon, let's say around that 2 hours, 40 minutes for me. And so I think to myself, time on feet in the goal race, time on feet when I'm running when I'm running long runs. I'm lucky because that sort of like elegantly aligns, like running 30, if you just run easy the entire time, running 34K with a bit of work in the long run, a bit of marathon pace or other work in the long run will deliver me to about 34K in about 2 hours and 30, 35, 40 minutes. So that's kind of an amazing sort of synergy for me, but I fully recognize if you're trying to run, say, a 3.5 hour marathon, it's very risky to be on your feet for 3.5 hours for those long runs. So you have to start thinking strategically about how it is that you're going to be able to effectively recover after a long run and then be able to continue your training in subsequent weeks. Right. So I wouldn't recommend everyone do it the way that I do it, but I would say that, like, I think the takeaway from all of us here is certainly like, I am against the over distance or marathon in training type long run. I do not believe in doing 26 miles in a marathon training block. And I certainly don't believe in more than that. So Cyr, can you imagine yourself ever running like 28 miles in a training run before a marathon?
That sounds like bad luck, but otherwise, yeah. I mean, one day I'll throw myself into the marathon and see, but no, like, it's like you don't run 12 by a K at 10K pace. That's like too much. Maybe some people do. I am superstitious.
Let's take a break and then we'll come back with the trivia, with the trivia answer. And then we'll wrap things up talking about why each of us thinks that having someone to bounce ideas off of is a valuable thing. All right, we'll be right back. All right, and we're back. And before we wrap up the pod and talk about the importance and value of coaching through a marathon training build, let's get to the answer of today's running quiz. The question was, what is the only vegetable that is proven to legally enhance your performance as an endurance athlete? And then sort of like a little bonus side piece of trivia is why is it also kind of dangerous to do? Because it's got one very serious potential downside for lots of runners. Katelyn.
Yes.
Do you have the answer?
I have a guess, and I don't know. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say beets, and that the downside would be that people can get like low blood pressure if they fill up on beets or beet juice before a race or a long run. Is that right?
That is correct. The first part is correct. The second part is like way too mundane and well thought out to be. It's much more childish and gross than that. Alex, did you also have beets?
I also had beets as my answer. I did not have beets for lunch. Therefore, at risk of being too graphic, my pee is clear and a little bit yellow, not red.
Oh.
Your pee turns red, but the main issue with consuming lots of beets is your GI tract may not be very happy with you if you chug a whole bunch of beet juice to prime your body to run faster, and then you try to run an endurance event, because it can cause some gastrointestinal problems. It's hard on the guts, beet juice. So there was 2 comprehensive surveys of like meta-analyses of all of the studies that have been done on consuming specifically beetroot juice for endurance athlete performance. One meta-analysis was done in 2020 of like 70 something studies. And then there was another analysis done in 2021 of, I think, about 80 studies. And both found that there was a legitimate performance-enhancing quality to beetroot juice specifically. There have not been enough studies done on just consuming beets, like the actual vegetable, like steaming or whatever beets and eating them, or eating another vegetable that's rich in the property that causes the performance enhancement, which is there is something called nitrite. I believe I'm getting this correct. There's a nitrite transformation. When you eat beets, they have this one, and I guess it's an enzyme within a property within it that your body then converts into another variant of that. So from nitrite to nitrate, and then what happens to your blood vessels is nitrate actually expands your blood vessels and allows more oxygen-rich blood to be carried through your body, which causes a natural form of performance enhancement. So that is why that's why you see people consuming beet juice. That's why there was like a little bit of a weird beetroot juice trend several years ago when this was first deeply studied. And apparently it is a legitimate performance enhancer. However, one caveat is it has not been proven to be effective in elite athletes. And both meta-analyses were not able to confirm if it was just that elite athletes are somehow immune to this because they're performing at such a high level, or if there weren't enough elite athletes in any of the specific studies that they looked at. So that's still on the table, studying elite athlete performance with beet juicing. So there we go. Okay, so let's wrap this pod up by just one quick but yet very important key aspect of the marathon training build, which is, I think, the importance of having someone as a sounding board. And if that's a coach or maybe a training group or running with a club that has a structured program in place, I think a coach is really valuable. Katelyn, you are a coach, so I imagine you feel strong. Do you have a coach yourself? Does the coach have a coach?
I do. I do. And I also find that that's really important. Even though I've been coaching for so many years, and I've had the running club here in Costa Rica for almost 11 years, and now I'm doing a lot of, not a lot, but it's one-on-one virtual coaching. I still have a coach. I feel like you shouldn't coach yourself because you're always going to feel like, especially as a coach yourself, you're going to feel like, no, I can do more. I can push harder. And I feel like you may tend to do more than you should. If you're a coach, you say, no, I'm a coach. I'm not going to run 16K today. I'm going to run 20 because I feel great. I don't know. It's just making those decisions and really being able to structure a training plan. I like having that guidance, and I like having that help. But yeah, I feel like, and of course it isn't just because, I probably am a coach for one of those reasons. The whole reason I became a coach was to help other people get their structured training in and be able to train and get to a race, injury free and super prepared. And so, of course, I'm going to say I really feel like everyone should have a coach, or at least someone that can help them out, because trying to structure your own training plan, or even like we're seeing today, using a training plan is great for guidance. Like, generalized training plans are already written, but there are so many factors that it comes down to that you need to be able to at least be able to modify those training plans to what you need. And like you said, Michael, having like a sounding board, someone to talk to and say, I felt like this today. I felt like that today. Should we make some modifications to the training plan? So of course I am 100% for getting a training coach. If you can have a running coach, it's definitely the way to go, to at least make sure that you're, performing at your best, or, reaching your goals, I guess, as efficiently and as injury-free as possible.
All right, guys, that's our show for today. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already. Give us a 5-star review. That would help us out a lot. And subscribe to our newsletter. I think we're going to 5 days a week for the newsletter. It's
Next week.
something new every single day. And make sure you also subscribe to our YouTube channel, where Alex puts out great video shoe reviews that are much watch every single week. He's got a new one coming up on Monday that we'll push out, and we'll put that in the newsletter as well. So, all right. Thank you for listening.
Thanks.